Nanny tried to replace me in my own house. My husband and I replaced her in a way she didn't see coming. We hired Rosa when our daughter Lark was 8 months old. I was going back to work full-time at a physical therapy clinic, and we needed someone 5 days a week from 7:30 to 4. Rosa came through an agency with a clean background check and 3 solid references. She was 26, had 4 years of experience with young kids, and she charged $22 an hour through the agency. During the trial day, Lark took to her immediately, and I felt good about it. My husband Dex worked from home most days doing freelance accounting, so he was in the house while Rosa was there. The first 3 months were perfect. Lark was happy, the house was in order when I got home, and Rosa was professional. She sent me updates during the day, followed the feeding schedule I left, and never overstepped. Then around month 4, I started noticing small things. I'd come home and Rosa would be sitting at the dining table talking to Dex while Lark napped. That was fine, normal even. But then I noticed she started wearing perfume to our house. She never wore perfume the first 3 months. I noticed she started bringing Dex coffee without him asking. She'd make one for herself and one for him and set it on his desk. She didn't bring me coffee on the days I worked from home. I noticed she started asking Dex questions about things she could have asked me. Where do you keep the extra wipes? What should I make Lark for lunch? Does Lark need a jacket today? She had my number. She could have texted me at any point, but she'd walk to Dex's office and knock on the door instead. I mentioned it to Dex and he agreed to redirect her. He told Rosa the next day that all questions about Lark's routine should go through me. Rosa smiled and said of course. Nothing changed. She kept going to him. She started timing her lunch break to match his. If Dex heated up leftovers at noon, she'd suddenly decide to eat at noon too. She'd sit across from him at the dining table and ask him about his work. She started commenting on his clothes. She told him a blue shirt looked good on him, and I know this because Dex told me that night and asked if I thought it was weird. I told him yes. He said he'd keep his distance. The next week, I came home early because my last appointment canceled. I walked in, and Rosa was on the couch in the living room watching a show on our television. Lark was asleep in her crib. Dex was at his desk. That was all fine, except Rosa had changed out of the clothes she arrived in that morning. She was wearing shorts and a tank top that she did not show up in. I asked her about it, and she said Lark spit up on her shirt, so she changed. I checked the laundry. There was nothing with spit up in it. The next day, I told Dex I wanted to let Rosa go. He agreed, but asked me to wait until we had a replacement lined up because he had a deadline and couldn't watch Lark during work hours. I called the agency that afternoon and told them I needed a new nanny and explained why. They said they'd have someone ready within 2 weeks. I didn't tell Rosa she was being replaced. During those 2 weeks, Rosa got worse because she thought nobody was watching. Dex told me she brought him lunch she cooked at her own house. She made enough for 2 and didn't make anything for Lark. He told me she asked him one afternoon if he and I ever thought about separating because she read somewhere that couples who have kids in the first 2 years of marriage have a higher divorce rate. Dex said he told her that was an inappropriate question. She told him she was just making conversation. The last straw came on a Thursday. I was at work, and Dex sent me a text saying Rosa asked him to help her reach something on the top shelf of the hallway closet. He went to help, and when he got there, she was standing on a step stool and didn't need help at all. She just wanted him to come stand close to her. He walked back to his office and closed the door. He told me he didn't want her in our house anymore, and that waiting for a replacement wasn't worth it. I agreed, but I didn't fire her that day. I waited until the new nanny was confirmed, which was 3 days later. On the day I finally let her go, I came home at my normal time. Rosa was at the counter making Dex coffee again. I set my bag down and asked her to sit at the dining table with me. I told her that Friday would be her last day. She asked why. I told her we were going in a different direction for childcare and that the agency would have the details. She looked at Dex, who was standing in the doorway. She asked him if this was his decision too. Dex told her it was. Rosa looked at me and asked if this was because she was too friendly with him. She said it like she was daring me to admit it. I told her it was because Lark needed someone whose attention was fully on her during the day and not split between the baby and anyone else in the house. Rosa asked if I was threatened by her. I looked at her standing there in my house near my daughter's high chair, and for a second I almost took the bait, but I didn't. I said, "I'm not threatened by you, Rosa. I'm ending a professional arrangement." Her smirk fell off. She turned to Dex and softened her face and said, "Dex, you know I've been good to Lark. Can we at least talk about this?" Dex didn't hesitate. He said, "There's nothing to talk about. My wife and I made this decision together." Rosa's mouth opened and closed. Her shoulders dropped. Then she switched. Her eyes filled with tears and her lips started shaking, and she said, "I gave everything to this family. I love Lark like she's my own. I don't understand what I did wrong." I didn't engage. I said, "The agency will handle the transition. Your last day is Friday." She nodded, picked up her bag, and walked out the front door. When her car was gone, I told Dex I wanted to write everything down. Every single thing she did, in order, with dates. He sat down at the dining table and said, "Okay, let's do it." I opened a blank document and we started at the beginning. Month 4, the perfume, the coffee on his desk every morning, the redirected questions, the lunches she timed to his, the blue shirt comment, the outfit change with no spit up in the laundry, the lunch she cooked at her own house and brought for 2, the divorce question, the closet stunt. When we put it all in order, line by line, date by date, it wasn't subtle anymore. It was a pattern, a clear, steady pattern of a woman testing boundaries and pushing further every time nobody stopped her. Dex sat back in his chair and rubbed his face. He said, "I should have said something sooner. I kept thinking I was making it a bigger deal than it was." I put my hand on his arm and said, "You told me every time. That's why we're handling this together." He nodded, but I could see the guilt sitting on him. He felt like he should have drawn a harder line earlier. I didn't blame him for that. After Lark was in bed, I called Marco. Marco has been my best friend since college, and he is the person I call when I need someone to tell me the truth, even when it's not what I want to hear. I told him everything. When I finished, he said, "You're not crazy and you're not jealous. That woman was running a play. The real question is whether she's going to go quietly." I said, "I don't think she will." He said, "Then keep your guard up through Friday. People like that don't lose gracefully." I hung up and let myself feel relief for the first time in months. We had handled it. By next week, this would all be behind us. Then at 10:15, Dex's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He picked it up and his face changed. He tilted the screen toward me. It was a text from a number he didn't have saved, but I recognized it. It was Rosa's personal cell. She had gotten it from the emergency contact sheet I had filled out when we hired her. The message said, "I just want you to to know I never meant to make things weird. You're a good dad, and I hope we can still be friends. I read it 3 times. That little wave of relief I had been riding just vanished. I told Dex not to respond. He blocked the number right there in front of me. I took a screenshot and added it to the timeline. The next morning, I called the agency before I left for work. I told the coordinator that Rosa had contacted Dex on his personal phone the night after being told she was being let go. There was a pause. Then she asked if I had proof. I read the text aloud word for word. The coordinator said, "That's a violation of our professional boundaries policy. We take that seriously." She said they'd noted in Rosa's file and that Rosa wouldn't be placed with families with male partners working from home. Thursday afternoon, I came home and something felt off before I even set my bag down. It took me a second to figure out what it was. The living room was slightly different. One of the throw pillows on the couch had been moved to the other end. That was small enough to ignore. But then I looked at the shelf by the window where we keep a few framed photos and I saw it. The picture of me and Dex from our anniversary trip. The one where we are standing on the beach and he has his arm around my shoulders and we are both laughing. It was face down, just lying flat on the shelf like someone had pushed it over. Every other frame was standing up, just that one was down. I picked it up and set it right back where it belonged. I didn't look at Rosa. I didn't say a word, but I could feel her watching me from the doorway. After a few seconds, she said, "Oh, it must have fallen. Sorry about that." Her voice was light, casual, like she was commenting on the weather. I said, "It's fine," and I left it at that. But the second she turned away, I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the frame standing up on the shelf. Photos do not fall face down on their own when nothing else on the shelf moved. My gut had not been wrong about Rosa yet. I added the photo to the timeline document that night. After Rosa left for the day and Lark was down for the night, Dex and I sat on the couch and talked about Friday. I told him I was not going to work. He looked surprised and asked if I had already cleared it. I said I would in the morning, but that I had made up my mind. I was going to be home all day. I was going to set up my laptop and work from there so I'd be visible the entire time Rosa was in the house. Rosa was not going to have a single moment alone with Dex. Not one. Dex didn't argue. He didn't say I was overreacting. He just said, "Good, I want you here." That meant more to me than he probably knows. Friday morning, I didn't go to work. I set up my laptop at the dining table where I'd be visible the whole time Rosa was here. Rosa pulled into the driveway at 7:30 on the dot. When she walked through the front door, I noticed she'd put effort into today. Her hair was blown out. She was wearing a nice blouse, fitted pants, a full face of makeup. She was carrying a small gift bag with tissue paper poking out the top. She set it on the counter and smiled at me and said, "I brought something for Lark, a little goodbye present." I looked at her and said, "That's thoughtful. You can give it to her after her morning nap." Her eyes moved around the room. They landed on my laptop, on the charger plugged into the wall, on the notebook and pen sitting next to my coffee. She tilted her head and said, "Oh, you're working from home today?" I said, "I am." That was it. I didn't explain. I just let those 2 words sit there. She picked up her bag and walked down the hall to Lark's room. Around 9:30, I heard her footsteps come down the hall. She stopped at Dex's office door and knocked. She said through the door, "Hey Dex, my phone isn't connecting to the Wi-Fi. Do you know the password?" Dex didn't open the door. He called out the password through the door. Just the letters and numbers. No small talk. She walked back. 20 minutes later, she was back. Another knock. "I think the baby monitor is making a weird noise, like a buzzing. Can you come check it?" Before Dex could respond, I stood up. I said, "I'll check it." I walked past Rosa into Lark's room. Lark was in her crib doing her pre-nap fuss. I picked up the baby monitor and held it to my ear. Nothing. No buzz, no static, no weird noise of any kind. I set it back down and walked out. Rosa was standing in the hallway. She said, "Must have been nothing. Sorry." I went back to the dining table and sat down without a word. Lunchtime came around and Lark went down for her nap. I heated up some soup and sat back down. Rosa came out of Lark's room a few minutes later, and instead of sitting on the couch or eating by herself like I expected, she pulled out the chair directly across from me and sat down. She folded her hands on the table and looked at me. I could feel what was coming before she opened her mouth. She said, "Can I ask you something honestly?" I set my spoon down. I said, "Go ahead." Rosa took a breath and said, "Do you actually think I was trying to do something with your husband? Because I wasn't. I'm a friendly person, and I think you misread the whole thing." She held my gaze. She didn't blink, didn't look away, didn't fidget. It was a performance. A good one. She had probably practiced it in the mirror that morning right after doing her hair. And for half a second, there was a voice in my head that said, "What if she's right? What if you did misread it?" That voice lasted about half a second, because then I remembered the text. The one she sent to my husband's personal phone at 10:15 at night after being told she was done. The one that said she hoped they could still be friends. I held eye contact and I said, "Rosa, you texted my husband on his personal phone the night you were told you were leaving. We don't need to have this conversation." Something shifted in her face. The openness she was projecting tightened. She said, "That text was innocent." I said, "This isn't a discussion. Today is your last day." She stared at me for a long moment. I think she was waiting for me to crack, to add something, explain myself, give her a thread she could pull, but I was done talking. I picked my spoon back up and went back to my soup. Rosa sat there for another 5 seconds and then she stood up, pushed her chair in, and walked back down the hall. After lunch, I needed to use the bathroom. I'd been holding it because I didn't want to give Rosa even 2 minutes of open space, but I couldn't wait anymore. I told myself it would be quick. 2 minutes, maybe less. I went, closed the door, and when I came back out into the hallway, my stomach dropped. Rosa was standing right outside Dex's office. The door was open. Not all the way, but enough. Dex was sitting at his desk, and his hands were flat on the surface, pressed down hard, like he was holding himself in the chair. His face had a look on it I had never seen before. Not angry exactly. Something colder than that. Something shut down. I walked up and said, "What happened?" Dex looked at me and his voice was tight and flat. He said, "She just told me that I deserve someone who trusts me more." I turned to Rosa. She was still standing in the hallway, not moving, not pretending to be busy. She looked right at me and said, "I was just saying goodbye." She stood there in my hallway, outside my husband's office, in my home, and told the man I built a life with that he deserved better than me. On her last day, with my daughter sleeping 20 feet away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step toward her. I said, "Rosa, please go back to Lark's room. We'll handle the rest of the day from here." Something in my tone must have landed because she didn't argue. She turned and walked back toward Lark's room and closed the door behind her. I looked at Dex. He was still sitting there with his hands pressed to the desk. I walked in and put my hand on his shoulder, and he reached up and held it for a second without saying anything. Then he said quietly, "I'm glad you were here." I squeezed his shoulder and went back to the dining table. At 2:30, Rosa came out of Lark's room holding her phone. She walked in and stopped on the other side of the table. Her face was different. The tears from 2 days ago were gone. The sweet act was gone. What was left was something hard and rehearsed. She said, "I just filed a complaint with the agency. I told them you created a hostile work environment and that I was emotionally mistreated in this home." I felt my chest tighten. I felt that pull toward panic, but I didn't let it take me. I said, "That's your right. I've already spoken with the agency and they have my documentation." Rosa blinked. A quick double blink. The kind you do when something you didn't expect lands right in front of you. She thought the complaint was her big move. She thought I'd go white. I'd stammer. I'd ask what I could do to make her take it back. But I'd been on the phone with the agency since Thursday morning. They had the text. They had my timeline. They had every single incident in order with dates. Rosa was holding what she thought was a grenade. The pin was already gone and it was empty. At 3 o'clock my phone rang. I saw the agency's number and answered. The coordinator said, "Rosa filed a formal complaint this afternoon. She's alleging emotional hostility, retaliatory firing, and an unsafe work environment. We need to take these seriously. Can you walk me through your side?" I closed my laptop and walked to my bedroom and shut the door. For 20 minutes I sat on the bed with my phone pressed to my ear and read from the timeline document. I started at month 4, the perfume, the coffee on his desk every morning, the redirected questions, the lunches Rosa timed to his, the blue shirt comment, the day I came home early and found her in a different outfit with no spit up anywhere in the laundry, the lunch she cooked at her own home and brought for 2, just her and Dex, nothing for Lark, the divorce question, the closet stunt, the text Rosa sent to Dex's personal phone at 10:15 the night she was told she was being let go, from a number she got off the emergency contact sheet without permission. I gave dates where I had them. I gave details where I could. I read direct quotes from things Dex had told me. When I was done, the coordinator was quiet, long enough that I pulled the phone away from my ear to check the call was still connected. Then she said, "You've been very thorough. I'm going to note all of this and submit it to our compliance team." I asked if the complaint affected my ability to hire a new nanny through their agency. She said no. She said if Rosa escalated to a labor board, it could complicate things, but the agency's internal review would not. I thanked her and hung up. I came out of the bedroom. Dex was in the hallway waiting. He had heard me close the bedroom door and he knew something was happening. I told him everything. The formal complaint, the allegations, the labor board threat. He said, "She's trying to make us the villains." I said, "She can try. We have everything written down. She has a story she made up on her last day." I texted Marco. He called me back inside 30 seconds. He said, "Don't panic. Labor board complaints from domestic employees are extremely rare, and they need actual evidence of wrongdoing. Real evidence, not feelings. You paid her through an agency. She had a contract. You gave proper notice. You didn't yell at her. You didn't dock her pay. She's bluffing to scare you. Finish the day. Let her walk out the front door. Let the agency handle her." I said, "Okay." I sat back down at the dining table. Rosa was in Lark's room with the door closed. Dex was back in his office. 60 minutes left. At 3:55, the door to Lark's room opened, and Rosa stepped out holding Lark against her chest. She walked into the living room where Dex and I were both waiting. She set Lark in the playpen carefully and adjusted the blanket around her legs. Then she straightened up and said, "Before I go, I need to say something." She turned her body toward Dex. She said, "You know it wasn't all in her head. You felt it too. The way you'd come out for lunch when I was here. You weren't just being polite." The room went still. Rosa stood there with her chin up and her eyes locked on my husband, and she waited for him to give her something. A flicker, a hesitation. Dex didn't flinch. He said, "Rosa, I came out for lunch because I was hungry. I answered your questions because I'm not rude, but I never once gave you a signal, and I told my wife everything you did because I don't keep things from her. Not one thing." Rosa's lip trembled. She said, "That's not how it felt." Dex said, "I'm sorry it felt that way to you, but it wasn't real." Rosa turned to me. Her composure cracked. She said, "You think you won? You're going to go through nanny after nanny because you can't handle another woman in your house." I pushed my chair back and stood up. I said, "Rosa, I can handle another woman in my house just fine. What I can't handle is someone who thinks my husband is part of the job description. You were hired to take care of my daughter. You decided to audition for a role nobody was casting. That's not my insecurity. That's your confusion." Rosa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She picked up her bag from the floor. She walked to the counter where the gift bag was still sitting. She pushed it a few inches toward the middle and said, "For Lark, if you'll let her have it." She turned and walked to the front door and walked out. Dex pushed the door shut behind her. My phone buzzed on the dining table. It was a message from the agency coordinator. Rosa's complaint had been reviewed and dismissed due to insufficient evidence and contradictory claims. Rosa had been removed from their active roster pending further review. I set the phone down face up so Dex could see it. The new nanny started Monday. Her name was different. The pay was the same. Lark adjusted by Wednesday. Rosa never came up again.